Welcome back everyone to episode 33 of the Card Combo Show, me, Chocobilly. I hope you're enjoying the lockdown locks. I'm not, hence the hat. Anyway, this week in the Card Combo Show I'm going to be looking at Bablizz from Opus 7, Sin from Opus 7 as well, Baralai from Opus 12, Paul from Opus 6, and finally Shantotto from Opus 10. Okay, so first and foremost, Bablizz. She is a 2CP 4K monster forward. So she is both, she fulfills the roles in all situations, hence the text Bablizz is a monster in all situations. When Bablizz is put from the field into the break zone, you may search for one card named Shiva and add it to your hand. So, Titania. It works excellent. These cards like Bablizz, Zapped, and Frit all work excellently for Titania because one of the awkward things about Titania is you have to have every type of monster, every type of character, every type of card in the break zone to be able to play Titania from your hand onto the field. Bablizz fulfills both monster and forward, so they work great together. Kefka. So you can put a total of 3 forwards or monsters you control into the break zone to play Kefka from your hand onto the field. So it doesn't really matter so much about the fact that Bablizz is a monster here. It's more the fact that if you were to put Bablizz into the break zone to play Kefka along with 2 other forwards or monsters, you will actually be getting a Shiva from your deck to hand, so kind of recurring Kefka's cost a little bit, even though you are having to sack off 3 monsters or forwards. But you get to break something, and then if you're maybe playing this into the Shiva as well. Gilgamesh 11 and Famfrit the Darkening Cloud. So when Gilgamesh 11 attacks, choose one forward of cost 2 or less in your break zone and play it onto the field. So you can combo this a couple of ways. You could have Bablizz already on the field and Gilgamesh already on the field. Cast Famfrit, put Bablizz into the break zone. That will then get you a Shiva to hand. You attack with Gilgamesh, you can use that Shiva if you want, but then that'll bring Bablizz back. Or you can do it the other way, where you attack with Gilgamesh first to bring in Bablizz, then you cast a Famfrit to get rid of Bablizz again and one of your opponent's forwards, and that will get you a Shiva which you can then cast with the Gilgamesh attack still in the stack. Mirror. The cost required to play your monsters onto the field is reduced by 1. It cannot become 0. When a monster you control is put from the field into the break zone, you may dull Mirror if it is active. If you do so, search for a monster of the same name and add it to your hand. So, unfortunately, you can only get, at the moment there's only 1 Bablizz in the game, so you'll only be able to get up to 2 more Bablizz using Mirror, but the fact that her cost is reduced, or Bablizz's cost is reduced via Mirror is also quite nice as well. And it works with all the other combos I've shown you as well. So, for example, the Gilgamesh one, you could Famfrit, put Bablizz into the break zone, use Mirror to then get yourself another Bablizz to hand, then Gilgamesh would attack, bring and Bablizz onto the field, just getting more and more cards to hand. Realm. When Realm enters your field, you may search for up to 1 monster and one monster of cost 1 and 1 monster of cost 2 and play them onto the field. And I don't care about the other text. So this is good because of the fact that Bablizz enters the field and it's already a forward as well. It's one of the few monsters that will enter and is just straight up a forward as soon as it comes in. Now, she isn't the most powerful monster / forward out there, but it's still good to be able to bring in 2 forwards if you need to. And combining this with a card like Flan means that you've got Bablizz and Flan that can both get you cards to hand. Obviously, it requires an Ice and a Dull via Flan to get another Flan to hand, but it sounds like a tongue twister. But either way, with Realm, you might be in water again, so as you probably imagine, I'm going to say Famfrit again. You can use Famfrit to Bablizz to get yourself a Shiva, you can use Flan then to get yourself more cards. It just kind of adds to the whole consistency engine that Ice Water can have. And similarly, Dandrine as well. You can use Realm to bring in Bablizz and Dandrine, and that will mean that Dandrine gets a singular counter on it as well. Now, you can combine this with Renoa, so and this is fairly costly, but you would play Realm onto the field and then play Renoa. Obviously, with Realm the first time, you'd bring in Dandrine and Bablizz, and then Realm could then bring you 2 more Ice monsters as well. Now, it is paying 9, but you're getting 3 forwards and 4 monsters. Either way, that's pretty decent, and Dandrine will probably be able to use this effect by that point to be able to dull and freeze 2 forwards your opponent controls. And Sin. When Sin enters the field, break all the forwards and monsters other than Sin. Sin deals you 1 point of damage. So again, it's more about the kind of recurring the cost of Sin. So you play Sin onto the field, it costs you 9, it's quite a lot, and you're going to take a point of damage. But Bablizz gets put into the break zone, she'll then search you a Shiva to hand, thereby giving you a bit more CP to work with once you've played Sin. So, Sin. Let's talk about Sin. I'm not even going to talk about it, but it's also got the S of Giga Graviton, S and 9. At the end of your next turn, if Sin is on the field, your opponent loses the game. You can only use this ability during your turn. So it's a hilarious S ability, and there have been quite a few different Sin decks over the years. They're all fairly similar in structure. They have to basically protect Sin and get you lots of CP to hand, but here's a few cards that Sin works well with. So Paravir. When Paravir enters the field, all the forwards you control cannot be broken this turn. And as Sin states, when it enters the field, break all the forwards. It means that they're being broken, but if you play Paravir first, it means that they won't break. So you're only breaking all of your opponent's forwards. You still have to take point damage, but it's a pretty decent trade-off. Now, you are paying 12 for a backup and a forward, but again, if you can do that, and that might be your push for game, right? You could play Paravir, or your forwards can't be broken. You can play Sin to then wipe your opponent's field. If they can't stop all your forwards that are still there able to attack, maybe you've got game. Galuf. Galuf cannot be broken during your turn, and Sin you're probably not going to be playing out of your turn unless you're doing some crazy Tama play, but either way, it's similar to what I was saying with Paravir. Apart from Paravir, you'd have to play it alongside Sin, whereas Galuf, he already has that stable ability. There are other ways to make plenty of forwards unbreakable as well, but again, that would probably require you to cast that ability alongside Sin, whereas Galuf here just has the ability ready to go. Mutsuki. So when a forward your opponent controls is put from the field into the break zone, activate Mutsuki. So let's say your opponent has 3 forwards and you play Sin. Technically, Mutsuki is going to activate 3 times. Now, she has the dull ability of choose one forward your opponent controls, deal at 1000 damage. But if all your opponent's forwards have been put into the break zone, probably not the best thing in the world, but it does recur you some CP again for Sin being played. If you are in maybe some Fire Ice, you could have Bablizz on the field and Mutsuki. That would mean you get a card to hand and Mutsuki reactivates, so it's 3 CP back from paying 9 for Sin. But also Mutsuki, maybe your opponent has a forward that cannot be broken, but it can still take damage. Oh, sorry, it cannot be broken by abilities that don't deal damage, like Legend Vincent, for example. Yeah, so you may be able to use Mutsuki in that regard. The Emperor. When the Emperor enters the field, if you have 2 or more card name the Emperor in your break zone, your opponent discards 1 card from their hand. When the Emperor is put from the field into the break zone, you may search for 1 card named the Emperor and put it into the break zone. If you do so, play the Emperor from the break zone onto the field dull at the end of the turn. Jesus, good lord, that is a mouthful. So, yeah, you can play Sin onto the field, Emperor gets put into the break zone, you remove an Emperor from the game, and then at the end of the turn, Emperor comes back in, and hopefully you get to make your opponent discard as well. It's just a nice way to be able to, even though you've broken all of your own forwards, you can kind of still recurse them back onto the field if you need to. Very old and Unsanganashi. So very old, when he's put into the break zone, choose 1 win monster of cost 4 or less in your break zone, play it onto the field, which you can then use to bring an Unsanganashi, which then sets up the protection for Sin if you want to go for a Sin Giga Graviton. Regis. So let's say hypothetically you played Sin onto, you got 5 backups, and you discard 3 cards from hand and use 3 backups to play Sin onto the field. That'll wipe all your forwards from the game, as well as, oh, not sorry, from the game, but into the break zone, and same with your opponents. You could then hypothetically, let's say you've got a Star Sybil backup, you crack that to bring in Regis. Regis then can bring in the forwards that just got broken from Sin. Now, if there are things that have haste or, entry abilities, like Viking, for example. Now, Viking's an excellent example of this because of the fact that Sin play, Viking gets put into the break zone, you get a card to hand. You play Regis onto the field, Viking comes back, you get another card to hand. Obviously, you can also combo this with Layla as well. So let's say you had a couple of Vikings in your break zone. So 1 put there from Sin, you play Regis onto the field, 1 brings back the Viking that just died, 1 brings back the Layla that just died. Layla can then bring back another Viking that was in your break zone. So, from playing Sin with Layla and Viking on the field with a Regis in hand ready to go, means you're actually getting 3 cards out of this. That's pretty good going. And obviously, Illiwa as well. Illiwa's a fantastic play with this because you play Sin onto the field, you've wiped your opponent's board, you then play Regis to bring back something and Illiwa. Illiwa has a really good S of activate all the forwards you control, they gain haste, and all your opponent's forwards lose 2000 power. Hopefully, Sin will have killed everything anyway, but if it hasn't, it's now lost some power, which means they're less likely to block the attacks from Illiwa and the other forwards that have gained haste, like Sin. Okay, Baralai, a very controversial card here, is a 3-cost 7k, so on curve, which is strange for a multi-colour card. But when one or more dull backups you control is activated due to your summons or abilities, deal 3000 damage to all the forwards your opponent controls. When your opponent discards one or more cards from their hand due to your summons or abilities, choose one character, dull it, and freeze it. So, the damage ability is the one that seems to get focused on a lot, but still, making your opponent discard one card and then he gets to dull and freeze any character they control, that's really, really strong. So let's focus on that for a little bit. Edward, during your opponent's attack phase, when a forward you control is put from the field into the break zone, your opponent discards one card from their hand. So that immediately means that if Baralai is there, your opponent doesn't want to break any of your forwards during your attack phase, their attack phase, sorry, because of the fact that obviously they're going to have a character dull and frozen, and they're going to have to discard as well, which is a lot. And if you've got things that are like first strikers where they're fantastic blockers, it poses them even more of a problem. Scale Toad. So at the end of your opponent's turn, if your opponent has 2 cards or more in his or her hand, your opponent discards 1 card from their hand. So, I mean, Scale Toad's a horrible card anyway, right? And sometimes people are just willing to take that discard. You know, you've got 5 cards in hand, and then you just go to discard down. You still get 4 cards in hand, which is nice, but now the fact that Scale Toad would combo with Baralai, so you also get to freeze, dull and freeze a character, it's insane, and that means your opponent's probably more likely to start getting their hands down to 1. Now, that may not be great if they're running an aggro deck or something like that, but even still, generally it's better to have more cards in your hand than not, because you have more opportunity to react and that sort of thing. So being able to dull and freeze something and make your opponent discard every turn whilst Baralai's there is horrible. And Gremlin, so you make your opponent discard a card, and not only do you get to dull and freeze something with Baralai, but you also get Gremlin as a forward, who also has the effect of when Gremlin is put from the field into the break zone, choose one forward your opponent controls, dull it and freeze it. So he's not only a really good little blocker, but he also just is pretty cheap as well. Gunbreaker. When Gunbreaker forms a party and attacks, your opponent discards 1 card from their hand. So let's say you've got Baralai and Gunbreaker on the field with Snow as a backup. You attack with Gunbreaker and Baralai, your opponent discards a card, you then get to dull and freeze something with Baralai, and if you've got Snow there, you can also dull out 2 of your opponent's forwards. So they've got an attack to deal with, they have to discard a card, and you've dull and froze any character and dulled out 2 of their forwards. Mutsuki! Now, it's worth noting here that Baralai states when one or more dull backups you control is activated. So if Mutsuki was already activated and your opponent lost their forward put into the break zone, and Mutsuki, you didn't use her dull ability at all, and she just remained activated and then activated again, you wouldn't get the 3k ping from Baralai. But Fire has some really good board wipe abilities and also some really good just breaking thing abilities. So having Mutsuki there to be able to break something, to then reactivate her, to then use her damage some more, alongside Baralai is just, it combos so nicely together. And similar sort of thing with Muti. When Muti enters the field, you may search for one fire summon added to your hand, and when you cast card name Bahamut, activate Muti. There's a few decent card name Bahamuts, including the forward, but I'm going to go for the new spoiler from Opus 13. If you've received 5 points of damage or more, the cost required to cast Bahamut is reduced by 3, so he can become a 2 CP for I'll get there in the end. 2 CP summon that will deal 8k. But what's good about this is the fact that obviously Muti will reactivate, and that will be 8k from Bahamut, but then also 3k additional with Baralai. And it doesn't have to be just this. You can use not just Muti, but you can use lots of fire summons, so things like Ifrita as well. If you've got enough Ifrits in the break zone, you could deal 7k to something and 3k to the board if you broke one of your opponent's forwards with that effect alongside Mutsuki. You would then reactivate Mutsuki, which then trigger Baralai, and you can just keep the ball rolling. Warrior of Light. When a job standard unit forward enters your field, choose up to 2 backups, activate them. When Warrior of Light attacks, all the job standard unit forwards you control gain plus 2000 power until the end of the turn. Obviously, we're worried more about the entry ability. So, using it alongside something like Mystic Knight would be fantastic. When Mystic Knight enters the field, choose up to 2 backups. If the cost to pay Mystic Knight included win CP, activate them. So this is where the whole kind of multi-element forwards thing started, and now you can see where we've gone. But This would mean that you're in the right elements already anyway, but then the fact that Mystic Knight will reactivate some backups, and so will Warrior of Light. Now again, you have to be careful with Baralai's text, they have to be dull backups to activate them, so if you're activating something that's already active, make sure they've got dull ability so you can use that dull ability then to reactivate them and get the damage ping. So just from playing Mystic Knight onto the field with Warrior of Light means that you are just getting a 6k ping to your opponent's board already. Obviously, because you've reacted for so many backups, you can then play another standard unit if you wanted to, or summons or anything, plenty you can combo into. But White Mage as well. White Mage is good because it's a nice little bit of protection for either Warrior of Light or Baralai, but also by playing White Mage, you are basically gaining CP, I mean, on-board CP. Obviously, you're losing the card from hand because you have to play the card, but you're only paying the 1 CP for White Mage, and then you get to reactivate 2. Again, make sure you're activating dull backups. Chocobo! How could I not talk about Chocobos? So you play a Chocobo onto the field, that'll play another Chocobo onto the field, that'll play another Chocobo onto the field, and that'll play another Chocobo onto the field. So obviously that's a ridiculous combo, but if you can do that, even just like 3 Chocobos, Chocobo into Chocobo into Chocobo, that would be 3 lots of activations with Warrior of Light, which would then be 3k damage. Now, this is where things get a bit wonky, because of the fact that Warrior of Light states choose up to 2 backups, activate them. You don't necessarily have to activate 2 of them. So say you're playing Chocobo into Chocobo into Chocobo, you can technically only reactivate 1 backup with Warrior of Light's ability. So say you pay 3 backups to play Chocobo into Chocobo into Chocobo, you can just activate 1, then 1, then 1. So you still get Baralai's effect. I think technically you can choose a dull backup and an active backup and choose 1 or more dull backups you control. Nah, let's just play it safe and say you have to use dull ones. But either way, you don't have to choose all the amount of backups you have to. They can be the dull ones. And you can only choose, like, as many as you want. Thief. When Thief enters the field, your opponent puts the top card of his or her deck into the break zone. So, a nice little bit of Opus 1 mill there. You play Thief onto the field, they mill a card, you get to reactivate your backups, and Baralai will do a 3k ping. Bit of a weird combo, but I love mill, and I just had to put it in here. Alrighty, what was I talking about? Mill Paul. He is a 2 CP 4k. Paul cannot be blocked by a forward of cost 3 or more. When Paul deals damage to your opponent puts the top 5 cards of their deck into the break zone. So a very strong mill card, but very fragile and easy to kill. So, Chelinka! When Chelinka enters the field, choose 1 forward until the end of the turn. It gains a Brave, and this forward can attack twice in the same turn. So if you can get Paul to attack and actually get the attacks through with Chelinka, you will have removed 12 cards from your opponent's deck. 5 each time for when he deals the damage, and obviously the 2 points of damage as well. They are 2 cards. Now, dealing damage to your opponent is its own form of mill. So 12 cards gone from their deck. That's insane. But obviously, like I said before, pull is very fragile, so you need to try and do this when your opponent either can't react, or you can use the Chelinka on pull to force your opponent's hand to get rid of that particular summon you know they've got. Snow and Arithmetician. The Arithmetician I really only put in here because I love Final Fantasy Tactics and I love the Arithmetician role. But yeah, so obviously you attack with Paul, you use Snow to dull something out of the way. Now the fact that Snow obviously can only be blocked by 2 costs means that you really don't want to get blocked by them, and there's a lot more higher powered 2 costs these days, especially stuff like Shadow Lord, or the card from last week whose name I've forgotten. You know who I mean though. Little 1 CP Earth forward. Yeah, so Paul obviously can still be blocked by those, and they've got a huge power, so you want Snow to be there to be able to block them. But let's say your opponent's got a couple of those forwards, use Arithmetician to just dull all those 2 CPs out of the way. Now, they could have 2 CPs and 1 CP forwards, but the chances are it's pretty slim. Zemus, just stop Paul from being blocked at all. Again, this will probably make Paul a fantastic target for your opponent, but it's the sort of stuff that forces your opponent's hand. And something like Zemus, there is more backup breaking now in the game, but it still doesn't get a huge amount of play. It's more freezing, really. But still, using Zemus to make any forward really unblockable makes your opponent go, I need to break that card. But something like Paul means they think, I really have to break that card. And Fel Thanos. Again, I mentioned that Paul will be very much a target for anything. The instant he comes down, even without any of these combos, your opponent's like, nah, I don't want to deal with that card, so just break it as soon as I can. Something Phil Thanos means that he will be absorbing and will be all a lightning rod for all those abilities. Now, you need to be careful of abilities that are choose a forward of 3 or less, break it. So that means obviously Phil Thanos doesn't fulfill that criteria, so Paul will still be broken by that. So other protection like Unsanganashi maybe, but you don't want to build a deck too heavily catered to Paul. Maybe have Paul and a few supporting cards, but he shouldn't be the main win condition. Ultimecia. So when Ultimecia enters the field, each player reveals a top card from their deck. Each player who revealed a character may play it onto the field. So this can bite you in the arse, so be careful of that. But if you play 2 water and 2 colorless, dull, and put Ultimecia into the break zone, choose one forward, put it on top of its owner's deck. So say your opponent's only got 1 forward, it's the forward that would block Paul, put it on top of their deck. You then attack with Paul, you deal them a point of damage, the damage is that forward that was there, and then they mill 5 cards. When Ninja enters the field, choose 1 forward. Against when this forward attacks, choose 1 forward, deal it 5k damage. So it means that if your opponent's only got 1 forward that can block Paul, when Paul attacks, he'll deal 5k damage something, and he effectively becomes an 9k attacker. And Bahamut 0, choose 1 active forward opponent controls, break it, dull forward opponent controls. Just a nice way to be able to move everything out of the way and go swinging. Finally, Shantotto. She is a 3 CP 7k. When Shantotto enters the field, reveal the top card of your deck. When the revealed card cost is 2 or less, choose 1 summon in your break zone, add it to your hand. When the revealed card cost is 4 or 5, choose 1 character in the break zone, add it to your hand. And when the revealed card cost is 6 or more, choose 1 forward opponent controls, break it. So basically, if you reveal a 3 CP forward, that sucks, because you're going to get nothing. But otherwise, you should be good. So let's hedge your bets a little bit. Playing something like Lightning or Seymour means that you can put 7-cost Odin on top of your deck, or, you know, any Odin really, but probably 7-cost Odin so you can break something when you play Shantotto. Yeah, I mean, Seymour's slightly better because it searches it from the deck and plays it on to your, or puts on top of your deck, sorry. Lightning is good for the recursion though, so, you know, both of these could be in a deck themed towards this Shantotto, but either way, it gets a 7-cost there. And that also means that 7-cost is ready to go if you want to take a point of damage. You can also then combo this with Unit, so then you use Unit to reveal the top card of your deck. If it happens to be 7-cost Odin, then you can cast it, but you can also just see what's going to be there before you play the Shantotto. Une. So let's say you play Seymour, and you put 7-cost Odin on top of your deck, you then play Shantotto, and you break one of your opponent's forwards. Then you cast a nice little ice summon. Let's just say Mind Flay. You dull one of your opponent's forwards, and you get to draw a card to hand. That'll flicker Shantotto. Oh look, 7-cost Odin still on top of your deck. You get to break something else. And Leviathan. Draw 2 cards, then put 1 card from your hand on the top or bottom of your deck. So it basically means that you might have something in hand where you're like, I really wish this was on top of my deck. Cast Leviathan, you put it there, you play Shantotto, jobs are good. Cool, there we are, folks. I hope you enjoyed this week's card combo show. We are on the precipice of Opus 13, and there's been a lot of fun cards. I'm so happy that we're getting some decent Final Fantasy Tactics support as well, especially the new Ovelia card. She is, mwah, love it. Anyway, hope you stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.